Hello, y'all, and welcome back. So, the Epicureans are hedonists. Pleasure is the good. Isn't this a shallow philosophy? It is not, say the Epicureans, and here's why. It would perhaps be a shallow philosophy, say the Epicureans, if we were saying that you should pursue the biggest pleasures. So you should go for the big, sensational, so-called party pleasures. Notably, one thinks of drinking and drugs, which create this tremendous artificial high. But we're not saying that, say the Epicureans. We're saying that you should pursue the best pleasures, and for three reasons, big physical pleasures are not the best. So the first reason is they're followed by a crash. So there's some intense low following the pleasure. This is true just at a chemical level. The brain naturally seeks homeostasis, so any kind of high, even the high of like eating a small piece of chocolate, is going to be accompanied by a concomitant crash. And of course, a tremendous high, like the high of certain drugs, certain chemical drugs, right, is going to be accompanied by a concomitant crash, often tremendous and calamitous and sometimes fatal, right? But this is also true of less innocuous pleasures. So supposing that you save up and you go with your family on a vacation to Spain, let's say, vacation to Spain. Nothing wrong with this at all, completely morally innocuous. And it's fine, except for the fact that as soon as you land in Spain, you see those beautiful hills or whatever. I've never been to Spain. I'm sure it's lovely. You're thinking in the back of your mind, 10 days and I have to go back. And then 6 days, and then it's 4 and 2, and then you're on that long flight back, and then you're stuck in traffic on 410 once again, and you're thinking, this ain't Spain, right? There's a crash. There's always going to be some, if you have in any way to get high, I'm not talking just about chemical high, obviously, but just to sort of get high to get there, there's going to be a crash afterwards. This is not saying that these pleasures, innocuous pleasures like a vacation, or less innocuous pleasures like drugs, are not pleasures. Clearly they are. It's just saying that they're not the best. The best pleasures would not be characterized by or accompanied by that crash. Second, they're hard to get. In other words, there is some pain now, not after, as in the crash, but before the pleasure. So this is, again, true. Let's draw a parallel here, or use as an example, rather, drugs, right? The more you do drugs, the more your body and brain become adapted to them, so you need more and more drugs to create just a baseline, really, right? Much less a high. And this is why many people, for many drugs, but especially most notably in the last 15 to 20 years, opioids, die. So many people were dying. I think the opioid crisis is alleviated now, but in economically depressed parts of the country, in like West Virginia, rural Ohio, that they couldn't fit the dead bodies in funeral homes. They had to put refrigeration units in warehouses and garages. Why? Because these drugs, which completely eliminate all pain, require more and more and more pills to create that baseline, much less the high. And of course, you reach a point where if you're going to just achieve your baseline, you need to take so much of these drugs in, so many of these drugs in, that it kills you. Okay, they're hard to get. So you're always chasing these. Now, of course, it's not hard to get innocuous pleasures like nice, meals and cars and clothing and stuff if you're very rich, right? It's effortless. Which is true, but you know what's hard to get? Being very rich. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So in whatever way, you've got to suffer some kind of pain or ramp up in whatever way to get these big physical pleasures. Again, doesn't mean that they're not pleasures. It just means that they're not the best. The third reason, this is a very Epicurean reason, that big physical pleasures are not the best, is that they are themselves mixed with pain. So there's pain after the crash, pain before, you got to save up, work up to it. But during the pleasure itself, there is some painful element. And here we need to refer to Epicurean metaphysics, where of course everything that happens is physical, right? So all pleasure, by definition, is going to be physical particles in the world moving over some part of your body. Now, the more intense the movement of these particles, the more intense the pleasure. But of course, movement at a certain intensity is painful. It crosses the line from pleasure to pain, and that threshold can, in some cases, be difficult to determine. About the most fun I've ever had, still to this day, I went to graduate school in New Jersey, and a buddy of mine, a friend of mine at grad school, had a house right on the Jersey Shore. Or his dad did. His dad was this big Manhattan broker, and he had this house right on the beach. So on the weekends, when we had time, we would go to this house and we would play in the waves on the beach and the Jersey Shore. And I grew up in, by Lake Michigan. I would go to the beach all the time. And Lake Michigan, if you have 3-foot waves, that's a really big wave. It's like, wow, the waves are really out today. These waves were 8, 10, even 12 feet tall. They would tower over you, often twice my height, and smash into you with tremendous force. You'd be knocked down like a doll. And you don't have this experience very often in adult life of just being thrown, or at least I hope you don't, of being knocked down. Back when I played football, I liked this feeling of contact. I was a safety. I like that feeling when the big running back comes across the line and just boom, smashes into you. I don't know, maybe that's weird, but I kind of like it. Football players will get it. But you're knocked down and you're pulled out and you have to swim as hard as you possibly can to not drown, really. And then you're slammed into the ground, and it's not sand, it's like rocks and shells, and it's painful. And finally you're washed up after a lot of struggling. And you're like, cut and bruised, and you're exhausted, and you're like, let's do it again. I could do that all day. There's really no limit to how long I could do this. So incredibly fun, playing in the waves. And the Epicureans would say, yeah, of course, Herrick, it's fun, but a large percentage of that fun is various kinds of pain, right? The impact, the contact, the bruising, the exhaustion, maybe the fear. A pure pleasure wouldn't be mixed with pain in that way. And of course, that's like a bit of an extreme example, but you don't have to go to extreme examples to find this. Any roller coaster, if you're somebody that enjoys rides or roller coasters, big part of the appeal is the fear. You may have seen, I saw on TikTok recently, this ride in Denmark, I believe, where you're just dropped on your back 400 feet straight down into a net. That's it. They just drop you into a net. And the guy that does roller coasters for a living said it was the scariest, ride or whatever he'd ever been on, the most fear he'd ever felt. People lined up around the block to do this, right? Pleasure and pain very closely mixed. But again, even like your favorite movie, for instance, a big part of the enjoyment, the catharsis of the movie is that there's some portion of the movie where you feel really bad. The couple is just broken up. They've had this huge fight, and they're never going to see each other again, or so it appears. The hero is locked in a warehouse, and he's going to be killed, and you're like, it's over for this guy, whatever, right? Okay. So the pleasure of these pleasures partly consists of pain. There's pain mixed in. Again, doesn't mean that they're not pleasure. It just means that they're not the best. So the Epicureans say, look, if you really think about it, what you're looking for is a pleasure that is not marked by these 3 major drawbacks. It doesn't involve pain before, saving up, ramping up, pushing. It doesn't involve pain during because of the intensity of the movement. And it doesn't involve pain after with the crash. What is this highest and best pleasure? We'll look at this in the next video. Thanks.